In the past, the Liberals have had a policy of staying out of local government, believing that it should be free of politics. But last year, the party's state executive decided to change the policy in select cases. State MLC for Newcastle, Virginia Chadwick, says the Liberals can no longer leave local government to Labor.
The nature of local government has changed from the traditional curbing and guttering to more community issues, and of course there are party views on such matters. Secondly, I'm increasingly resentful of the way that our political opponents, the Labor Party, have used local government as a training ground for candidates for state and federal government. And thirdly, it's a matter of numbers. I believe we can return Liberals to the City Council under the new system.
Mrs Chadwick says the new citywide franchise system that will replace the old council wards should ensure that the Liberals win at least 2 or 3 seats on the smaller council of 12. Last night's decision must now be approved by the state executive, but once that formality is over, the local Liberal branches will be quick to select their candidates, and in particular the party's candidate for Lord Mayor.
Commend the town clerk.
Dr Parnas's nightmarish description of Star Wars attracted a capacity crowd to the No. 2 function room at the City Hall. The Doctor could not fairly be described as a radical nor a peacenik. As a world-renowned scholar in computer software engineering, he was asked to join the team working on the Pentagon's Strategic Defence Initiative. SDI aims to protect the United States from incoming missiles by a combination of satellite tracking and computer-controlled laser guns. Yet after only 3 weeks in his $1,000 a day job, Dr Parnas concluded that it is not possible to build a computer powerful and reliable enough to direct weapons at perhaps hundreds of incoming missiles.
Because I decided that the project was fraudulent, that people were being asked to make a system that would make nuclear weapons impotent and obsolete, that would end the fear of nuclear weapons. And in my opinion, most of them realize that they can't do that, and they're only going to make the situation worse.
Well, if most of them realise that they can't do that, then why are they continuing to work on the SDI?
There are a lot of different reasons. Every individual has his own reasons, but many of them have told me that they know they can't do it, but they think the money will be good for their field or their company or themselves.
Dr Parnas believes we must look for other ways of eliminating the threat of nuclear war.
The board has 132 hectares of land which it has agreed to hand over in stages for inclusion in the Glenrock State Recreation Area. Recommendations have been made to Mr Aquilina by the board about the timing of the handover. The Minister today indicated, however, that this may be a lengthy process. A management committee must be set up. The department also needs to raise money.
The other thing is I need about $300,000, and I've made representations to the Treasurer on that, and I'm fairly confident that in the new budget session we will be able to get that money, and hopefully we'll be able to get that totally handed over and provide this tremendous amenity for the people of this area.
Any time limit on that?
Well, let's say give me 6 months and I'll come back and do another interview.
Are you familiar with claims by concerned groups that the land is being spoilt in the meantime by access roads and by sludge from the board's Burwood Beach project?
Yes, I am aware of that. Mind you, I've only just become aware of the details of it because I received a letter yesterday precisely on that issue. I'll be preparing a full report on that and making some very quick decisions in the light of the representations which I've recently received.
Mr Aquilina was in Newcastle to launch a $225,000 safety campaign aimed at alerting school children to the hidden dangers of stormwater drains. During the past 10 years, 20 children have died in drains in New South Wales. The government hopes to eliminate this type of tragedy. A former school teacher, Mr Aquilina was at home in the classroom. He told students at New Lambton South Public School that a sudden downpour can flood an empty drain in minutes. The children were told they should never play in or take shortcuts through drains. They were shown what not to do by a passerby, who also heeded the message. The man's body was first noticed by workers in Hannell Street. They alerted the police, who in turn called in members of the Scientific Investigation Squad. Police believe the man may have fallen into the water and was carried downstream. They say there are no suspicious circumstances surrounding his death, and an autopsy on the body will be held tomorrow. The plan focuses on the Throsby Creek area at Carrington and Wickham. It was prepared during the past 6 months after the Maritime Services Board offered its former workshop site at Garrett Street to the Department of Housing. The Minister, Frank Walker, said public housing on the site would be undesirable unless the whole area was improved. Newcastle architects Suitors, Bastide, Corner and Clode were commissioned to prepare a plan. It was unveiled today. The plan is only a guideline but proposes improving the foreshore areas by dredging, reclamation and landscaping. It proposes demolishing the Hannell Street woolsheds, building new public and private housing, a navigable span bridge at Cowper Street, boat launching ramps and mooring facilities. Architect Brian Suitors said this would allow Carrington to realise its full potential.
There's an existing community already here. There's the infrastructure for schools and roads and public services. They're all here, and at present they're underutilised. So the potential for a renewal is enormous.
Now, you must have done your sums. How much would your conceptual plan cost to implement?
Well, that's a very difficult question because you really can't put a cost on what we're putting forward.
The plan has been thrown open for public comment. It will be distributed in pamphlet form throughout Carrington and is also on display at the City Administration Building until the 9th of next month.
Meredith attending the conference marks the peak of her 13 years involvement with the Girl Guide movement. The conference is based on the theme of international understanding and will look at the work of UNICEF and other international welfare agencies in contributing to world peace. This, Meredith says, is an important aim of the guiding movement.
Well, hopefully we can learn things that we can bring back here and implement them in our daily living and how they can help everybody else.
Meredith, only 2 rangers from throughout Australia were chosen to represent at the conference. Why do you think you were chosen?
Well, when we put in for this to be nominated, we had to say why we would like to go to the conference and how we could bring it back and use it in New South Wales and Australia. And I suppose the ladies liked my ideas.
And why did you want to go to the conference?
Well, I wanted to achieve something in guides. I've been in it for 13 years and this is just the peak of guiding. There's things like all different things. You can get awards and things like that, Duke of Edinburgh awards and things like that, but this is something that I feel I can take into the rest of the guides and not just do it for myself.
Information obtained from the census is used to provide accurate population counts at national, state and local government levels. It's also used in planning services such as transport, schools, hospitals and housing projects. The census is carried out every 5 years and this year Census Night falls on the 30th of this month. The Bureau of Statistics says strict measures are taken to ensure confidentiality. The information obtained is fed into a computer but without the person's name. It could be more than 2 years before all the information from this census is collated, but according to Peter Howell from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, it will still be relevant.
Obviously, with a population of something around 16 million, it takes a while before we can get all the information produced, but it's still relevant in the sense that it's the latest information which we have, and it provides a very sound base for projecting the population forward rather than rely on the last census, which is now 5 years ago, and the data will be even older by the time we get out the 1986 census results.
For the record, it is compulsory to take part in the census. Failure to do so can result in a fine of up to $100 for every day you refuse to answer, and in the end, you'll still have to fill out the form.
Despite the contract being announced and work on the site to begin this week, the residents are far from conceding complete defeat. They say it contravenes the council's height codes, and they're willing to take the matter before the Land and Environment Court, and if necessary, take on the bulldozers similar to anti-development protests last week in the Sydney suburb of Balmain. The Northern Parks and Playgrounds movement has now lent its support to the East End residents. President Doug Lithgow says the resident groups are not against public housing in the East End, but against housing contrary to the original award-winning design. In that design, the public housing was to be built nearer the railway yards.
There are alternative sites here, you know. There's a lot of old sheds, and the railway owns a large amount of land at this area of the city, and this development could easily be located only a few hundred metres away from where it is now and not cause any of the problems that it's going to cause.
The hunter's natural heritage has paid a heavy price over the years as man has endeavoured to make money out of agriculture, horticulture and grazing. Treeless flats and slopes testimony to his folly. If the Forestry Commission's dream comes true, however, native trees will once again be a feature of our landscape. So typical of so much of the Hunter Valley, a bare and denuded paddock. But not for much longer. When this tree and the 1,000 others in this paddock grow, this will become a grove, a woodland of a number of species. It'll provide shelter for stock, recreation areas for people, but most importantly, it'll become a model for other farmers to come and visit, and for them to find out how to plant trees and of what benefit they are to their farms. Wyndham Estate is one of 24 properties being used by the Commission to develop these models. Scrub along the riverbank is being cut down by some of the 42 people being employed under CUP funding in the $500,000 scheme. And a bulldozer is being used to clear noxious plants such as Nagura and Bathurst burr, aniseed and castor oil trees. In a couple of years from now, this should be a good example of how trees can be used for riverbank stabilisation, erosion control and as well recreation. Elsewhere on the estate and throughout the valley, models are being developed for grazing properties, dairies, horse studs, orchards and small crops holdings to show how trees can be utilised to enhance the diversity of agronomic systems. All the properties have been carefully selected. They're all publicly accessible, all in their own right are successful, and all are managed by people with a commitment to regreening the Hunter and an ability to provide fencing materials, water and site preparation. Project officer in charge of the Forestry Commission scheme is Peter Dice.
If you look at the major land use of Australia, the major areas are farming areas, and if we're going to try to put trees back onto the land, farming communities and farmers in general are the people that we have to approach.
Watching that game with England and Paraguay, the throat chop to Gary Lineker, which could have been more serious than it turned out to be, must have brought memories back to you. It was rather similar.
Well, it was a very similar series of events. You know, England were playing Paraguay, we were playing Uruguay. They were leading when it happened, we were leading when mine happened. Gary got hit behind the play, I got hit behind the play, both were against the throat. Mine was probably a little bit harder, did a little bit more damage, you know, but
both a very similar type of incidents. Yeah, it certainly brought back some memories, you can say that.
Yeah, bad memories. And what might have been? You'd played, what, 50 times for Australia by then?
I played 48 full internationals, quite a few other games in that as well. But, you know, that was the last game we played before we were off to the World Cup in '74, so it was a hell of a disappointment to realise that my career had finished then, yeah.
Described, I hear on the telly the other night, as the best player Australia ever produced, Ray Baartz. That's you'd be modest about that, but that's a rap.
Well, it was pleasing to hear that coming from Craig Johnson as well, you know, so I'm very tickled about that, yeah.
Sure. OK, what's to happen? Can England go all the way through in that climate?
Well, I wouldn't back them, but I think there's any one of the 8 nations that are through to the quarterfinals can win it. I think teams that looked like being the favourites have now fallen, but then you've got the old favourites like Brazil and so forth that are still hanging in there. So I think anyone can win it from here on.
If you had to have a bet now, who would you put down?
I would back Brazil, I think, at this stage, yeah.
We're offering to final year students at CAEs and universities now to go on a cadetship. That is, they'll be paid forthwith and for the remainder of their training on condition that they accept an appointment anywhere in the state and stay there for at least 2 years.
Are you looking to recruit solely within New South Wales?
No, we're hoping to recruit from anywhere in Australia, or indeed anyone who might notice that we have a shortage, and we will be putting them into schools provided they have the requisite qualifications anywhere in the state.
Now, that target figure of 600, does that cover the present shortage in New South Wales?
The present shortage is somewhere between 45 and 60, but it will get worse without additional measures.
Is there the chance then that you'll end up with too many teachers?
We could end up with too many teachers sometime after 88, 89, but that's not a consideration at this stage. The important thing, I think in everyone's mind, is that we have a teacher in front of every class in every classroom in the state.
Mr Cavalier was in Newcastle for the official launching of Supernova, the city's own hands-on science and technology centre. Supernova is soon to be relocated in the old Castlemaine Brewery building to form part of the proposed regional museum. Instead of occupying the second floor of the Pink Elephant Markets in Hunter Street, plans unveiled today house Supernova on 820 square metres of the former brewery's ground floor. It's hoped the complex will be open in mid-1988.
It's Pleasant Flight getting a half length in front, playing top and final showdown are coming fast, but Pleasant Flight is too good for them, and Pleasant Flight wins.
Later Cooktail trainer Neville pinched a nerve in his lower back as the horses left the barrier. He is certain to miss tomorrow's Rosehill meeting, where his only booked ride was folding money.
Politicians, union leaders and Labor Party supporters gathered at the Western Suburbs Leagues Club last night to wish Neville Wran and his wife Jill a happy retirement. The Premier said the Hunter had played an important role in the 10 years of the Wran government, and on the question of the future, the Premier gave a strong indication as to where the Hunter was heading, especially with major projects like the Submarine replacement contract.
My belief is that the lion's share of the Submarine will come to Newcastle, provided Newcastle can demonstrate that it can deliver the goods. In other words, give stable industrial relations.
It was a chance for Cabinet Ministers, local politicians, union leaders and Labor Party supporters to wish Neville Wran and his wife Jill a happy retirement. It was also a chance for a commemorative wine launch, a task very much appreciated by the Premier. The special series of red and white wines is in honour of former Lord Mayor Joy Cummings and is in recognition of his service to the community. But then it was back to the serious side of politics and the role the Hunter has played in the 10 years of the Wran government.
The Hunter, I repeat, is a critical region, not only for the state but for the country. and no government can ignore its needs, and no government can forget its importance.
Can it remain a Labor stronghold?
Oh, I'm pretty confident of that.
And on the question of the future, the Premier gave a strong indication as to where the Hunter was heading, especially with major projects like the submarine replacement contract.
My belief is that the lion's share of the submarine will come to Newcastle, provided Newcastle can demonstrate that it can deliver the goods. In other words, give stable industrial relations.
Gary Harbell started the tournament with the proud record of never being defeated on the Newcastle #1 court. That has special meaning when you realise that Harbell played the top Koreans on the court last year, and prior to that had met many good Australians there. Once again this year, the NBN Crossroads Mitsubishi Newcastle Open attracted a good field, and that made it all the more difficult for Harbell to maintain his record. Australia's #3 rated player, Rodney Carlisle, made the trip from Melbourne for the tournament, and this state's top 8 players were also competing. But the man who many thought might be too good for the local was Hong Kong's Cam La. La is a former Asian youth champion and a spectacular counter-attacker. Harbell made it clear though that he's a class player and defeated La solidly 21-17, 21-16. The Australian champ leaves in 2 weeks for the Oceania Championships in New Zealand, where he'll try to win Australia a spot in the Olympics.
The tranquil rural community of Butterwick near Kurri was shattered by the fire. This fibro and weatherboard cottage was totally destroyed, and the owner's personal belongings along with it. 2 firefighting units as well as the bushfire brigade rushed to the blaze at about 1 this morning, but the house was already well alight. Although the official cause of the fire is not known, early theories held by police is that it may have started from a combustion stove in the lounge room. The owners of the house, Alan and Shirley Bennett, are now staying with friends and relatives. They escaped unhurt, but the books, furniture and personal effects lost in the fire will be hard to replace.